we've talked about the confusion at DC, but something that is exciting that they're doing. So James Gunn is promising kind of like a change to their animated movies and how they release them. So we're going to start seeing animated movies from DC coming out in theaters. And I think anyone that's been a fan of DC properties can tell you one thing. When it comes to animated movies, they tend to hit it out of the box quite a bit. Christian, like when you hear this, what do you kind of like think? What are some thoughts on James Gunn announcing this new model for DC?
So I think it's really smart because, like you said, with the DC animated movies, they're always good. There's been a couple of rough ones, but other than that, they're always solid. They always bring in the lore from the comic books into the films. So I think this is pretty smart, especially since Sony Pictures has been doing the Spider Verse movies. I think this is a really good move on DC's part. They're certainly beating Marvel on that because Marvel hasn't released any animated Marvel films ever in theaters. So I think this
Yeah.
is a really smart change. The good thing with animation is it's cheaper. No matter like it could be really cheap and you'll still make back your box office with it. That's honestly why a lot of animated movies are being made every year. What do you think?
Well, you save a lot of money, like you said, digitally. You save a lot of money in actually having actors on camera. Like you can cast some big name like voice actors, but they're not nearly going to run you as much as like actually casting like a Henry Cavill. Like hell, you could have Henry Cavill voice of Superman if you really wanted to, and it won't cost you but a fraction of what it would cost you to have him on camera in a movie trying to digitally remove a mustache from his face. That's
Yeah.
something the DC would not have to deal with if they went this route as far as like releasing these. And considering that they've had such flops recently, I'm sure at a certain point, Warner Brothers, Discovery, whatever they are at this point, they need to just make money. The fact
Hmm.
that they have lost money in some of their premier properties, again, it costs 300 million to make the Flash, and what they
Hmm.
make in total, like a little over 100 million. It's on digital now. They they lost a ton of money in that. They've been losing money with the Shazam movie that came out. They lost money with Black Adam. None of these movies are cracking like 400 million, so it's a problem for them. Or 400, yeah, it's a problem for them in terms of like how much they can actually pocket. So like, hey, like from a business perspective, I think it's smart for them to release their strengths because that's something they've always had on Marvel. Like,
Hmm.
and it's one thing why I've always rooted for them and rooted for a lot of their characters, even over Marvel, is because for our generation, right? Growing up, we had Batman the animated series, we had Justice League the animated series, we had Superman the animated series. Jeff Johns, all those guys were doing amazing work interweaving it. The fact that they had a shared universe like they
Hmm.
did, I feel like was very groundbreaking, almost even too for Marvel. I feel as though like they paved the way with what they did in animated movies and TV shows to be able to do what Marvel did in live action with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So
Hmm.
I feel as though if they were able to bring some of that magic to the screen and yeah, maybe increase the budgets, right? Like you mentioned the Spider Verse and how good those movies are. Like I was marveling at the animation that went into the second into the Spider
Hmm.
Verse. If you told me that DC pumped up the budget a bit, not too much, because obviously, again, you still want to be profitable with these, to really increase the effects in their animation while also having the same storytelling that they've been able to capture over the years, then that's where I think they will really shine. It's and if it plays into the grander universe, because I think he's even alluded to the possibility that even though they won't be all live action, these things might actually even have a role to play in like what I'm doing here in the live action universe. Well, that's
Hmm.
kind of exciting too.
Yeah, exactly. It's exciting because like we don't know what stories they're gonna tell. The DC animated films, they always tell the best stories in the comic runs. Like my favorite one of all time is still the Flashpoint Paradox. To me, that's
Yeah.
like one of the best DC animated movies. Batman Mask of the
You're you
Phantasm,
have me
like
in pain right now
right.
mentioning how good the Flashpoint Paradox was, because if you told me they just honestly put a theatrical release of that instead of the Flash movie we got right now,
Yeah, dude.
I would be 1,000 times happier than I am with what I saw
Yeah.
with the Flash.
And then also, like I mentioned, Batman: The Mask of the Phantasm. That movie is amazing. Like
Well,
they're even
well,
re-releasing it right now.
well, they released that movie in theaters, and from
Hmm.
I from what I remember, I think they made them money. So it's almost surprising that they never revisited that.
Hmm. Yeah, and then they just always hit with their animated movies. Even recently, they have the new My Adventures with Superman, which I hear that that's a big hit right now. It's a
Well,
big hit on Adult Swim.
they've had missteps too, like the I know remember right around when Young Justice was really becoming popular, they had a misstep in one season where it wasn't as good and the quality dropped off.
Hmm.
And then they also had some misgivings in rebooting their animated universe.
Hmm.
They handed the reins off to like new voice actors and whatnot. Was one of the first times we didn't have Kevin Conroy as Batman
Hmm.
consistently,
Yeah,
and I didn't mind the new guy. It just it was jarring for me to not hear Kevin
yeah,
Conroy's
because
voice playing Batman.
we're used to hearing that iconic voice, and all of a sudden, and then even Mark Hamill, like I think there's been some movies where Mark Hamill's in it, and then some where he's not, and then some he's in and some he's not.
Yeah, and think about like all the movies that we've already gotten animated, that never got a theatrical release. I almost feel like this is like 10 years too late, though.
Mm,
Honestly, because we've already had a lot of like shit. Think if they had Under the Red Hood, or yeah, Under the Red Hood, like
ooh,
released in theaters
that would
back
have
in the
been
day. You know,
that would have been good.
that would have
Yeah,
been a win. Or when if they got to release the Dark Knight Returns in theaters.
mm,
Like
yes,
if they would have done that, then they might be in a better situation than they are today. These movies have already been released. The Killing Joke, and I know that wasn't well loved at the time either, the
mm,
animated version of it. But if they got to release The Killing Joke in theaters, that would have been better for them. And I mentioned Kevin Conroy, but now we're moving into a phase of Batman where I'm going to be disappointed that Kevin Conroy's Batman never got theatrical love aside from Mask of the Phantasm back in the day.
yeah, exactly. I so all around, it is a good decision that they're doing this,
Might be a little late
but
though, don't you think?
a little bit. Then like you mentioned the missteps. There's even been some animated movies where I'm just like, dude, this movie would have been way better if it was a TV show on HBO Max or Adult Swim. Like for example, Injustice. I didn't like the film, but that would have been
Yeah.
amazing. That would have been amazing on Adult Swim or Max.
Don't you kind of feel in a way, and hopefully this is not the case, hopefully I'm wrong about this, but the failures at the box office for them in live action have started to hurt them in other departments. Like, I do think their animation is still great, but I do think that their animation isn't as good as it once was.
No, it's the quality has dropped off a little bit. There might have been layoffs that we don't even know of, because I mean the thing with movies with film studios is when they have a bad box office, it does hit other departments like rapidly. So
Yeah, and
all these flops could have really changed the quality of the animated films, and we don't
so
even know of it. You know what I mean?
yeah, like I kind of wonder if that's affected their decision making even in that department. And
Mm,
maybe they just need to start replaying the hits a little bit with like the DC AU, I guess. It's all under one branch now too, which is kind of weird. Like DC has its
mm,
own studio. That was the biggest change whenever James Gunn got over there. It's like, oh, Marvel has their own studio just dedicated to Marvel stuff. DC
mm,
was like, okay, we need to have our own studio just dedicated to DC stuff. Um, so James Gunn has even had a little bit to say in the animated universe, and I wonder sometimes too, has James Gunn just bit off more than he can chew? Like in terms of all the things that he's encompassing, it sounds like he's
mm.
got too much power at times. I like James Gunn's influence, and we won't really know the end results until James Gunn is probably like 2-3 years into this rebuild.
Hmm.
It feels weird. It's almost like talking about like a sports team almost when we talk about like what James Gunn has to do with this. It's almost like
Yeah.
the DC universe has been a tanking team. And in fact, 2023 seems to be like their year where they're just like, screw it, we're just going to bench all the starters. We're just going to like play the rookies and see what comes out of it. Get some high draft picks. That's what it feels like when I think about what James Gunn is doing right now.
Yeah, I feel like we're Jonah Hill from Moneyball right now. We're just
We just,
looking at everything and seeing
oh,
what they could do.
literally. I feel like we need guys to just get on base. I feel like that's what this move is, right? Like,
Mm,
hey, you know, the DC animated movies, they won't hit home runs for you, but you know what they'll do? They'll get on base. That's
yeah.
what they're doing. You're right. Yeah, that's perfect, honestly. The DC universe is playing Moneyball.
Hmm.
Like, they're not home run hitters like Marvel is right now, but they're trying to build a winning team by just doing the little things. And this might be like the little thing that kind of gets them over the hump. And
Yeah.
hopefully that turns into some World Series championships. That turns into some home runs, some big time moments. Like every now and then they'll come in with a pop, into the stands. But
Hmm.
for the most part, like they've just been a lot of duds, a lot of pop outs, a lot of strikeouts in particular. Well, yeah, and the
I'm
Flash talk about a strikeout.
I'm just hoping that all this leads to the Justice League film that we all want to watch and the one that we should have gotten in theaters originally. But with the circumstances at that time, like there's a reason why we didn't get that.
Yeah. Well, all right, guys. Well, hey, new idea for DC to try and right the ship. Do you like it? What movies are you disappointed that from back in the day that should have got a theatrical release but didn't? Like to hear your thoughts on that one. I think that's an interesting question. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on our social medias. From Julian and Christian, stay safe, happy, and healthy. We'll see you next time.